live from Capitol Hill, Tuesday, 18 February, the year of our Lord 2020. This is War Room Pandemic, Episode 19 on the John Fredericks Radio Network, the Salem Broadcast Radio Network, on the streaming platform of the Trump Movement, americasvoice.net, or .news, americasvoice.news, and of course, 99.1 FM in Chicago and 103.9 in the Chicago suburbs. Want to thank our partners in Chicago for bringing this to the heartland of this country. Why we do War Room Pandemic? You know, we have the War Room show. The first hour we do War Room 2020. The reason we do Pandemic, it's only the most important event going on in human history. So, and what is that? This is a massive pandemic that has started in central China, in the Hubei province, in the city of Wuhan. We called this a couple of months ago, and it only gets worse. And we're going to talk about the scale of it today, every aspect of it. We're also going to talk about President Trump. President Donald J. Trump is taking a historic trip to India next week to meet with one of the great populist nationalists in the world, and that's President Modi, Prime Minister Modi of India. They're going to have a 2-day meeting next week, and we have two individuals here, Dave Ramaswamy, who was here early in the week. He's at the Hindu Latin Ventures. Indus Latin Ventures, and also just a brilliant guy that helps us think through these issues. Jay Kansara, who is an activist in the Hindu American groups here, the volunteer groups here in the United States, and was somebody associated with the Howdy Modi, which is still, I think, the best event President Trump's had during his presidency. And we've got Dr. Stephen Hatfield will be joining us later in the hour. Okay, and Jack Maxey, of course, runs the War Room every day. I want to get down to all of it here as we talk about the pandemic, how it's affecting India. Also, most importantly, the strategic potential partnership we have between India and the United States in trying to sort this whole mess out. Big news overnight, and really crushing news. And you can tell it's rattled the Chinese Communist Party senior members. Dr. Li Zuming, who is the head of surgery at Wuchan Hospital in Wuhan, and probably the senior medical guy in Wuhan, died overnight from the virus. And you can tell that rattled people not just in China, it's rattled medical people throughout the world, and particularly rattled senior members of the CCP. What do we know about it, Jack?
Well, and interestingly, they did the same thing they did with the previous doctor, the ophthalmologist who died.
Dr.
The
Lee.
Resuscitation efforts in the media lasted for half a day until they finally admitted that this.
Well, this is CCP.
Away.
They panicked, was losing, just like Dr. Lee, losing someone who's so heroic and so well known as trying to put this thing down in Wuhan province. They, they panicked and they tried to put him back on. The word is he's not dead, he's in critical condition, etc. But then they had to admit that he had died.
Well, and it was becoming hard. For example, just yesterday, the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention released a study that says that there are actually 3,019 medical workers who have been infected, and 1,600 of them are in severe condition. So this is really starting to affect the ability of the professionals to even deal with it.
We talked about the phases of this. The one of the most important phases, when you see the collapse of the public health service in China. I was on Jesse Waters' show 2 Saturdays ago, and I said the 3 things they have to do immediately is, number 1, they have to bring down the firewall. The firewall that separates the Chinese people from the rest of the people of the world on the internet has to come down. We have to have direct communications by the people in China to let us know exactly what's going on, and that they know that there is help and support in the outside world, number 1. Number 2, they have to accept immediately the CDC and World Health Organization, the virus hunters, the top thing, and they've still slow-walked that. There's a team of WHO people. In fact, go back to number 1. Xi came out and said they're going to actually double down and increase the separation on the firewall. They're not going. They think it to save, for social stability, which is nonsense. Okay. Number 2, they haven't accepted anybody from the CDC. The White House has been very upset about this. They've accepted some World Health Organization just to Beijing to sit in their hotels and play around with data, not to actually go to Wuhan. But the third, I said on Jesse Waters, which is probably the most important, eventually you're going to need to save the Chinese people and to save this thing becoming an absolute historic plague. Medical personnel are going to have to go into these areas because you're seeing right now a collapse of the public health service. And remember, last week, I think it was On Wednesday, they finally copped it to the fact that there were 500 people infected. Now, medical personnel. Now there's what 3,600.
3,600.
1,500. When they place you in severe conditions in China, you're dead, right? This is where they're backing up the cremation truck to get you. President,
and it's interesting because they say 3,600 and 1,500 in severe condition. This would outstrip the numbers that they're giving for regular people who are ill, because in general, only about 15% of the people tested ill get sick. This is half of the people in this number.
Exactly. One thing to remember is Dr. Lee, the heroic doctor who was an original whistleblower in this, that was chastised by the court system and the police for being a rumor monger. Turns out he was a hero saying this. When he went back, it was heart-rending to hear his interview with the New York Times. He said, I made a mistake. I got careless. An older woman came in. He's an ophthalmologist. She came in. He took off the hazmat suit. He made one simple mistake when he was working on her cataract, and it cost him his life. That's how deadly this virus is. And she was asymptomatic. She was asymptomatic. He said, I got careless. She was asymptomatic. I worked on her. Later, it turned out she transmitted the virus.
That could be the epitaph for the CCP. I got careless.
Yeah. President Xi says, the virus is a demon, and we cannot allow this demon to hide. President Xi, we're trying to assist the Chinese people in not letting this demon hide. I want to go to Dave and to Jay, and thank you guys for coming in. Dave, you were a huge hit the other day. We hope Jay represents as well, because you were big. I want to talk about, just as you've seen it, you brought up a great point the other day. You're obviously a guy that understands high order math, but you said one of the things people have a tough time understanding is exponential
functions.
Exponentiality, about scale. Talk to us, just from when you were here a week ago, how this thing is scaled up.
No, Steve, you got to remember, you had very vibrant cities in China till about 2 months ago. Of course, many names like Wuhan, Hubei, other cities in China, nobody in America had even heard of. But if you see the visuals on the streets, they tell a story that no data can capture, which is you go from really vibrant cities at the start of December to absolutely dead, desolate cities 2 months later.
And Wuhan's 40% bigger than New York City in population.
Absolutely. So the point I tried to make was the greatest tragedy of the human race is our inability to understand the exponential function. And I will restate the example I gave the last time, which is if you imagine a petri dish full of viruses, and these viruses are doubling every minute. At 60 minutes, the petri dish is full. When is the petri dish half full? So most people with an insufficient understanding of math would say 30 minutes because they say, hey, that's a half of 60. But it's incorrect. The answer is 59 minutes. So people don't realize how fast an exponential function can overtake and overwhelm you. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. The public health infrastructure of China has collapsed. And you would think they're a relatively advanced middle-income country and they know how to handle things. And the response of the Chinese Communist Party deploying the PLA, deploying their military police to clamp down and lock down large cities. I mean, now you have people, a population almost more than the size of the US, nearly 400 million people on lockdown. So they're taking it very seriously. And I think it's time that we in America start to take it seriously as well.
Do you think America and the world is not taking this as seriously as they should?
I think many bureaucracies or centralized systems are not designed to react to fast-moving events, especially pandemics. You know, you saw an example of China trying to build a hospital in 10 days. Like in many bureaucracies, you can't even get a meeting set up in 10 days. So I think it's going to go to like local groups, regional groups, and other community-oriented organizations and the private sector to take steps to mitigate this crisis. And the example is clear. I mean, if you look at what's happened with the airline or shutdown of flights to China, the impetus behind it was the American public who voluntarily canceled tickets, and the flight attendants union at all the major airlines. So the federal government reacted very slowly in comparison.
You're saying it was grassroots. Jay, what are your thoughts about this? Particularly, I know you and I have been in conversation since this first started, since it's such a massive interest in India.
Absolutely. India is a country of 1.3 billion people. They do share a land border with China, as well as with Nepal, who has a larger land border with China. So the implications of a virus outbreak in India are, of course, just staggering, because you have some of the most concentrated metropolitan areas in the world: New Delhi, Calcutta, Mumbai, Madras, etc. They make New York City kind of look like a small town at times, similar to the cities in China.
Before we get back to the whole situation in India and how this can be worked out, anything else about your thoughts on where we stand today from a week ago?
Whatever number of cases that's publicly out there, I think the number of victims or affected patients would be 100 times more.
Yes.
It's vastly, the number of the official stats are vastly understated.
Yeah, people are actually saying, we're hearing from people that there may be several million already infected all over, which kind of makes sense. When you look at Dr. Gabriel Lung, you look at these analyses that were done 3 and 4 weeks ago that said, look, it doubles every 6.2 days. They thought the base at the time was 44,000. The 10-cent number that got leaked inadvertently a couple of days after that showed 155,000 infected. I think 25,000 deaths at that time. Sources that we have in China have not been verified. I said there's with the 100 million that are in quarantine and now the 400 million additional lockdown, and some of this is self-lockdown, is that there's actually up to a couple of million maybe potential with over 100,000 dead already, which kind of makes sense if you look at the scale of this thing. It's still in that central region in these other cities at complete and total lockdown.
Sure. And if you remember, Steve, 5 million people from Wuhan left the city before any lockdown was put in place. And if you look at what's going on in villages and other communities in China, you have these self-organized groups who are policing, who are keeping outsiders out. Okay? So,
in other words, if you show, first off, in Hubei province, they've announced no vehicular traffic. They've shut down. The province is the size of France. You're talking 80 million to 100 million people.
Sure.
They have said no vehicular traffic. We don't want guys going from village to village.
New York Times had some very interesting analysis on this morning. They're saying essentially 150 million people now are quarantined along the lines of Wuhan. But they say that the local cadre in the various municipalities and cities and villages around China have been given the ability to create their own quarantine standards. So really what they're saying is there are 760 million people in China whose neighborhoods and villages have imposed strictures of some sort on the residents coming and going.
This is why we're doing this show. This is going to have an impact on not just the life in India, it's going to have an impact on life in Europe and the United States, everywhere throughout the world. When you're at this scale, which is biblical in proportions.
1 in 10 people on the planet right now is under a quarantine imposition in China. 1 in 10 people on the planet.
10% of the people on the planet in lockdown. It's the scale of it is absolutely incredible. If you remember, we had Dr. Thayer on here, and Lian Chan Han had written the two-part piece in The Hill called this the biological Chernobyl. Jay and Dave, I want to go to you. Is that in Chernobyl, and particularly if you watch the HBO series, was pretty accurate. At least Putin doesn't think so, but people in the West do. The key to the Chernobyl thing is that the apparatus, the official centralized decision making, it was about not just their incompetence, not just their first ability is to cover everything up, to keep information themselves, but they didn't know what they didn't know. That the scale of the event was so big, they didn't actually understand it. That seems to be the situation here. She sent Vice Premier Sun down there. She's the woman that's kind of like the Khrushchev at Stalingrad. She goes in and says, hey, we're not backing up an inch. In fact, she said, this is what quarantine means to me. Quarantine means to me that we're going to go door to door. It's a city the size of New York. We're going to go door to door. We're going to knock on every door. We're going to take your temperature. If we deem that you're sick, we deem you're coming with us, and that's where we got all these videos of people being dragged out of their apartments. You're going to a quarantine center where you go in and you leave by, ambulance to be cremated later. You're not. There's no way that you're not there. It's not a hospital. And if you don't go, they said patriots do that, and traitors will be nailed to the cross of history or however they described it. But they're nailing people in, they're shutting people into the doors. They're not playing around. They understand they've got a massive problem. Forget how it was covered up, all that. That'll all come out in time. But right now, they have an operating problem that is just expanding exponentially.
See, the larger point is many people in high government are not domain experts. I mean, they lack expertise in systems biology, in mathematical statistics, in information engineering, bioinformatics. These are highly complex technical fields which requires domain experts. And we in America have them. India has them. China has them too. But the Chinese Communist Party, like you said, in a combination of face saving and a combination of self-preservation is preventing them from reaching out to the outside world, including organizations such as the CDC and other experts in America, to deliver help to their peoples.
Why are they stopping that? President Trump has now offered 3 times to send the CDC, been rebuffed every time. Why do they not want people like the CDC? Why do they not want the CDC actually to not just go to Beijing, but to go down to Wuhan?
The answer again, Steve, is the problem is far, far worse than they let on to. And if American experts come on the ground and discover that the number of cases is understated according to official statistics, and the true numbers are, say, of infected are 3 million, 5 million, 10 million. I don't know what the number, it's in the millions for sure.
Why do you say it's in the millions for sure? Just as you've seen this.
Again, exponential functions. I mean, you've had, since the Chinese Lunar New Year, that was in middle of January, 3rd week of January.
Yeah, around the 18th and 19th, 20th.
Yeah, in a month. And we have doubling of cases every 6 days. So the math is simple. I mean, if you're willing to look at it directly in the face. So if American experts and other international experts come on the ground in China and discover and report to the world the seriousness of the infection, I mean, it would cause a worldwide panic.
Jack, and one of the things we're trying to do is to avoid a panic by having a show that once for an hour a day gets the top experts of the world, and then we put it out. Jack, because I want to turn to India in a second as a potential partner, what's going on there with Modi and this historic trip of President Trump, really, quite frankly, in the middle of this is quite historic. Any other updates? What else has become big today? I know the economics is and we'll get to more of that tomorrow, is absolutely astounding. Apple downgraded their guidance for 2020.
Apple has downgraded their guidance. HSBC, the largest bank in Hong Kong, says they're going to cut 35,000 jobs over the next 3 years, but it's going to start pretty quickly.
And also offload $100 billion of assets.
Right, and they're talking about $600 million in loan losses just this quarter. Airlines across Asia have cut routes, not just to other Asian cities, but to Europe, to the rest of the world. This is watching air freight costs go through the roofs because things normally get carried in the extra space and cargo on these flights. You're watching container shipments around the world slowing down. In China, for example, they have these things called reefers, which are essentially refrigerated boxes, which might be filled with pork from the Midwest or chicken or what have you. And when they get to a port before they get delivered, they get plugged into these reefer blocks. Every one of those extension cords in all of China has a box attached to it. There is no more space in any Chinese port. So eventually we're going to start seeing some of this stuff rot on the ships or rot on the docks. The transportation issue in China is critically messed up right now.
Yeah, we know from the analysis we saw. We had the professor on yesterday from Vietnam, the American at Fulbright University, said there's literally no movement of any of this stuff around. You can tell by the rail, freight movement. You can tell by the coal burning. We'll have more of that in the next couple of days. In the middle of this, we got about a couple of minutes till we go to break. And Jay, I want to turn to you. In the middle of all this, right, we now have President Trump going to India to meet with Modi in a historic visit. Why now, and why is this important for Trump to go?
Well, India, the relationship that the United States has with India is by far the relationship that has the most upside in every way, whether it's economic, political, geostrategic, defense, etc. And to just further this relationship after the president's visit, the Prime Minister of India's visit and his program that he had in Houston, it's only natural that these two groups are coming together. These two countries are coming together. Now, there's a lot of speculation in the media about a trade deal, and literally every other headline that's coming out of Indian media is that it's on again, it's off again, it's on again, it's off again. They're like, it's like a bad relationship or something. However, it's a great relationship between the
Sounds
president
like Trump negotiating.
and the Indians are also negotiating hard too.
So they tell me. So they tell me.
And what many people would like to see out of this relationship is an alternative to China. And I think if President Trump says the right things, makes the right moves in India, we can have that alternative, and it'll be great.
Okay, we've got Jay Kansara, an activist in the Hindu American groups here in the United States, one of the guys in back of Howdy Modi, which was the best thing of President Trump. We're going to come back. We got Dave Ramaswamy. We're going to come back after the break and get into all this in detail. But the strategic partnership, and particularly what can help expedite this in this pandemic. Dr. Stephen Hatfield, our great virus hunter, will be with us. We're going to take a short commercial break. We're in Pandemic, episode 19. We're going to return in just a second.
Sorry, I can hardly hear myself.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Episode 19, live from the nation's capital. That nation would be the United States of America. It's Tuesday, the 18th of February, the year of our Lord 2020. We are joined by Dave Ramaswamy from the Indus Latin Ventures and an expert in all these areas, and Jay Kansara. Jay is a Hindu American activist. Was one of the people in back of the Howdy Modi. President Trump is leaving on a historic trip in the middle of this pandemic, a historic trip to India to meet with President Modi, who we say was Trump before Trump. He's one of the great populist nationalists throughout the world, and really a great leader. Also now joined by Dr. Stephen Hatfield. Dr. Hatfield is from the Pros from Dover. He's a former biodefense researcher at the U.S. Army's facility up in, I guess it's Frederick, Maryland, where the pros are. He's an adjunct professor at George Washington University, and one of the world's top virus hunters. Has been involved in all the big pandemics or epidemics that have gone on in the last 10 or 15 years. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. Very, very serious. So before we get started talking about the strategic partnership and the strategic alliance and everything that possibly can happen, I've had a number of listeners to the show have either tweeted and DM'd me or through our Twitter or have emailed me or texted me. And one of the things I want to say is that we had Rosemary Gibson on last week. She wrote the book China RX that brought to light the fact that we don't make any drugs here in the United States, don't make any component pieces for drugs. We don't make any. We had Mike Bowen on here with Mike Bowen's N95 mask. We only have one production line here in the United States. You brought up last time you were here, Dave, about how we don't make anything. But some of the listeners are saying, hey, we love India. India's fantastic, could be a great strategic partner. Love Modi. Modi and Trump are kind of the same type of guy. However, India is just another version of the United States. You guys don't actually make anything. You're also dependent upon China for not just the component pieces, but also for many of the ingredients into the medicine. So they're saying, hey, before we talk about how India and the United States are going to partner together to save the world from this pandemic, doesn't India have the same problem the United States has?
Yeah, absolutely, Steve.
Thank you, listeners.
What your listeners are alluding to is accurate, which is the active pharmaceutical ingredients, known in the drug business as APIs, are mostly manufactured in China. So this is a shared threat to the lives.
Okay, explain to people, this is what Rosemary Gibson, how did this happen? How did it happen? And particularly, it's bad enough it happened in the United States, but stuff like this happens to us all the time. The globalists come in, the corporations come in,
Sure.
They want higher stock prices. But our brethren in India, right? You're supposed to be one of the guys savvier than us on the world stage. How did you guys get picked off too? I mean, how did this happen that India doesn't actually make any of the ingredients?
Cheap is expensive, expensive is cheap. Over the last 30 years, listening to most academic economists, we have chased short-term profits over long-term security. And now the chickens have come home to roost. And China entered the WTO in 2001, and since then, the process has accelerated, moving all supply chains which existed in America and India to China. And the Chinese state-owned enterprises have access to near cheap power, free water,
Unlimited capital.
unlimited capital, which does not respect the P&E or P&L. So they are unconstrained from the laws of finance, which is in place in America and in India.
People forget
to-
India is the largest democracy. You guys still have, it's all accountability. At the end of the day, you
Absolutely.
said the companies, you're a capitalist society,
Yeah.
and you're a democracy.
Yeah, India's had a vibrant stock market since the 1870s. We have 5,000 listed companies. So outside of the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ, I mean, India's like one of the most vibrant stock markets in the world. And like in America, India has private sector entrepreneurs obeying common law, obeying intellectual property. So you have US and India with common values and shared interests, which have been blindsided by China, who's into full spectrum dominance of the global economy, not playing by the rules, not respecting international order, not respecting intellectual property. So at this time, I agree that India is in the same boat, but there's Indian generic drug manufacturers which have invested over $5 billion manufacturing in America. They have created over 5,000 jobs in over 20 states, and now working closely, President Trump with Prime Minister Modi can reinforce the critical pharma networks that need to be in place. And I'll leave with two examples, Steve. You know, people who get a coronary bypass, they are temporarily put on a heart and lung machine, right? It's called extracorporeal breathing. So we don't want to say to Grandpa, who was a member of the greatest generation, who fought the Nazis, Grandpa, your life support system is controlled in China. You know, famous last words. We don't, I mean, this would be a huge disservice to our veterans, to our seniors, to our valued members of society. And many people believe in the resurrection. I think it's time to implement the resurrection. We need to resurrect key medical pharma supply chains right here in America.
So how do we do this? Jay, jump in here. How do we, by the way, I want to say something about your point before I turn to Jay, is that the China price. These are people that knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. This
Yes.
is what we're paying for today. India is
Yeah.
going to pay for it. The United States is going to pay for it. The entire West is going to pay for it.
Yeah.
The Chinese people are going to pay for it. Remember,
Sure.
this was all put into process by the Wall Street and City of London supporters of the Chinese Communist Party and their corporatist partners that were always looking for the cheapest price on everything, not understanding the value of it. Jay.
And I think one of the bridges that both the U.S. and India need to cross and need to recognize is that the Indians living in the United States, who are mostly U.S. citizens, or a good chunk of them are. I myself was born here. I have the birth certificate to prove it, as was Dave. So you look at who is President Trump taking in his official delegation? He's taking 6 or 7 Indian Americans in his administration. One is Seema Verma, the head of Medicare, Medicaid.
One of the senior people in health.
And another gentleman is Mr. Dr. Sampath Shivangi, who also works on one of the president's mental health advisory committees. There is a wealth of knowledge and human resources based in the United States that will help the United States get out of this problem.
So we have human capital, but let's go back to what is the immediate plan? If you have to sit there, look, we've got a longer term, we have a trade deal, we have obviously military spending that we can start to work together as allies, but we're in the middle of a crisis. And I think that even India has a better sense of this crisis than maybe even the United States, because you're right at the tip of the spear. We're in a crisis. This crisis could blow apart the world's economy. What is the action plan? If you had President Trump's ear and able to advise him or talk to him, what would you recommend that should happen in this trip?
The short answer is build a bio wall. And what do I mean by that? We need to include biodefense and pandemic preparedness at the top of the agenda. I know there's a trade deal in the works. The U.S. has planned to sell like helicopters and advanced weapon systems to India, and that's a welcome development because India and the U.S. work closely together for security in the Indo-Pacific.
But you're saying that's for a kinetic war. That's a 20th century concept.
Absolutely. And now we are in an era of fourth generation warfare. where viruses don't respect bullets or borders. So I'll give an analogy with the human body, and we have a blood-brain wall, blood-brain barrier, which prevents pathogens from the body entering the brain. We have an intestinal wall where any toxins or parasites we eat from our foods doesn't enter our bloodstream. So Mother Nature has walls in place to prevent pathogens and toxins from infecting live tissue. So we need to take this analogy into the real world. We need to protect the peoples in both of our countries, India and the US, by building these biosecurity or bio corridors. It's already in place, Steve, if you look at in food and agriculture. There's quarantines, there's plant and animal quarantines. There's not a free flow because you risk of, the risk of contaminating the food supply is very high.
What do you mean by that? That already exists. What are these corridors?
The corridors is,
They have a cordon sanitaire.
A cordon sanitaire. When you come into the U.S. On a flight, one of the questions the customs people ask you is, are you carrying any live plants and animals?
Well, if you go from Arizona to California, California has it. If you go from Arizona to California, the guy at this thing says, "Hey, you bring any plants, or you got any shrubs, or fruit or vegetables, or you bring anything in?"
Absolutely. So we have to take this cordon sanitaire or bio quarantine, which exists in our food and agriculture sphere. America is an agricultural superpower. And the reason we are is our food safety laws are the most stringent in the world. We need to extend this to health safety and include the biodefense and biosecurity as part of the national security thought process.
This is part of the thing that the globalists to go back to the China price and the price of everything, the value of nothing. We took for years, and this is what we've been saying as nationalists, both in India and the United States, is that the globalization project never considered national security, but it definitely didn't consider health security.
Sure.
That this logistics chain can transmit this thing so quickly. You're just saying, hey, it's a combination. Health security is 21st century national security.
Absolutely. And to add to that, food security and health security underpin national security. And what you're seeing in China, proves this. Large sectors of the Chinese economy have effectively shut down. 90% of their exports are shut because they can't get any workers. A healthy economy depends on a healthy workers and healthy and productive citizens. Health is the ultimate wealth, not pieces of gold or silver. And this crisis has demonstrated that. So President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, as part of their talks, need to put this health security and biodefense at the top of the agenda.
How do they do that, Jay?
Well, the Indian economy has a very vibrant pharmaceutical industry, and they actually already are manufacturing. Many of those companies are manufacturing here in the United States.
But how much of that, it has a robust pharmaceutical, but right now, aren't we in 90 days? The APIs that go to the Indian pharmaceuticals are all coming from China. Is that not correct? So my point is on one level, because we have a robust pharmaceutical at one level too. But when you look at the substrate of that,
yes,
this is the issue. And this is what I think is so great about the War Room Pandemic. Listeners, they're already on this saying, hey, we love India, love Modi, we want to do something. But when you pull it all back, we're all constrained right now because India fell into the same trap the United States. You took the cheapest component prices that happen to be made in China. Is that not correct? So how do we, as partners, how do you actually move it forward if we do have this massive constraint?
So, for example, one of the constraints that's going to come out in the market very soon is that almost 100% of penicillin, because it's a very cheap drug, and the margins of profit are extremely low.
It's off patent.
It's off patent, are developed in China.
100%.
India is going to have to become a manufacturer of penicillin very quickly.
How do you do that?
Well, I'm not a scientist or a pharmacologist, but I know that it's going to require investment from the United States as well as India to jointly partner on these types of projects. And these are the types of agenda items that should be in New Delhi as well as in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, which is actually the hub of pharmaceuticals for India.
This is the first place. This is actually Modi's. Isn't this Modi's?
First stop.
But it's also Modi's home district.
Yes.
This is where the beating heart of really Hindu nationalism, or the nationalism that's now the prominent political kind of the offset of the Gandhi thing, has really come from that area and that area of the country. Correct?
Sure. Steve, I know, as you know, nationalism is a very loaded word, but we like to think of it in positive terms. So let's protect, I mean, we are open to, and Gandhi had a great quote. He said, I want the windows of my house to be open to the cultures and ideas of the world, and the winds of these cultures to blow about my home, but I don't want to be blown off my feet. And that's a great analogy, which is, as American citizens, I'm my brother's keeper. Let's take care of our citizens first. Of course, we care about the welfare of the Chinese people and other oppressed people in the world. But, fundamentally, let's start locally and regionally to decentralize our economy and put
This
more.
is the key of economic nationalism. It's actually localism. It builds
Yes.
upon building blocks of localism, which becomes economic nationalism. It doesn't mean you don't trade. It doesn't mean it's not a globalized system. This
Yes.
You're against globalization. No, we're against smart. It's the Westphalian system.
Yes.
Set to, and this is why India is a great example. You had 800 million votes in the last election. I mean, to say that
900 million voters and 600 million voted for Prime Minister Modi. He's got the biggest electoral mandate in world history.
World history, two times the size of the United States population. More importantly, is that I would love to send you guys to Iowa and this weekend to Nevada to help us actually think through these caucuses. There wasn't a lot of scandal about your vote.
Yeah,
when you go, it
absolutely.
takes a while. It takes 30 days because people vote by paper or how you guys do it. But the vote is kind of the people. Nobody complains at the end of the day about mass voter fraud.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, if you see what happened in Iowa and now what's going to happen in Nevada, it seems like the Democratic Party is as democratic as the Democratic Republic of Congo. I mean, they made a complete mockery of being inclusive and taking into account voters' voices. I mean, so you have these insurgent candidates like Andrew Yang, like Bernie Sanders.
The Yang Gang,
The Yang Gang, I mean, who rallied ran a very effective social media campaign to get support for some of the ideas. And Steve, as you know, there's a core group of voters who not only support President Trump, who also support candidates like Bernie, candidates
big
like
time.
Yang.
The Bernie Bros, the
like
Yang,
Gabbard, yeah.
Tulsi Gabbard.
So let's build this inclusive coalition. Thomas Jefferson said, the tree of liberty needs to be refreshed time to time with the blood of patriots.
God, you're real deplorable.
I mean, I will
Ramaswamy, you're real deplorable.
I will add to that, let's add the brains of patriots. Like all of us who care about our country, who care about the welfare of our citizens, who care about economic security, need to come together, just putting ideology aside, to rebuild the foundations of our medical and healthcare system.
And you're saying one of the ways to do this, Rahm Emanuel said, never let a crisis go to waste. You're saying, and now that we have a crisis, that, one of the things is tear down the firewall in China. But more importantly, you're saying we got to build a bio wall in the West. And this is not to be...
And in the East.
In the East, yes. We're
Yeah.
not trying to be... exclusive of the Chinese people or whatever, but you're saying that this bio wall needs to be built up for everybody's health security, which is national security. One more time, go through for the audience. When you say build a bio wall, get to the details. What are you talking about?
In the short term, it's like you're going to have a whole ecosystem crop up, which our countries need to work on together. I mean, I call it innovation for industry and infrastructure. We need to add biological and health infrastructure to the current infrastructure, what we think of as roads and bridges and highways, right? So what does this mean? To detect some of these outbreaks, we need like reliable test kits. Some of the test kits that are out in circulation are showing false negatives. So you have people with coronavirus who've been misdiagnosed. So you need accurate PCR test kits. You need sensors. You need, like what's going on in China. You need like drone deliveries of goods and services and pills when people are sitting at home. So India and the US have a unique opportunity to create a brand new ecosystem of high-tech products and services to protect peoples not only in our two countries, but also in a continent of Africa.
Can this start off in this 2-day trip, which is already jam-packed with, events? He's all over the country. In India, it's absolutely massive, but he's all over the country in some huge events already. Is there enough time to actually get this on the agenda, which in the middle of this crisis you would think would be pretty high?
We have some indication that it is going to be on the agenda, and it needs to be on the agenda. And I think both countries understand that they have each other, and that's about it to get them through us.
I want to go to Dr. Hatfield for a second. What Dave Ramaswamy's talking about, this biowall, walk through. Is that a concept? Do you think that you come from the tip of the spear of the virus hunters, right? Is this something that you guys have been arguing about for a while? That this needs to be that this health security, and particularly this part of it, needs to be part of economic security and national security?
Absolutely. Health security is national security.
What about, he's talked about the test kits. You've argued for a while, we only got a couple of minutes left, the issues with the test kits, the testing, and now coming off of, why did they take the Americans off of the ship in Yokohama, which you've been saying is the best lab we've got? You think you'd want all the lab experiments to stay there. Why did we take the Americans off?
I think the disease can be followed closer here. They've gone to Nebraska. It's
To an Air Force base, right?
I'm not quite sure the details, but it's a controlled environment with controlled staff that are experienced in personal protective equipment, not likely to get infected, and the up-to-date clinical diagnostics. So we can start to follow these patients to see when they secrete virus into the environment.
To see what the asymptomatic nature of this thing is, what they're really
to pin
doing.
this down.
Okay, you're saying this is going to be a big advance. So this is very important.
And possibly for some therapy.
Real quickly, we only got about a minute and a half left. I want to get back to the guys. You've been my wingman here since the beginning. Is this thing now metastasizing more rapidly than you thought? Is it scaling up to Dave's thing about exponentiality more rapidly than you thought, or along the lines you thought?
I still think the cases are being underreported in China.
About how much? Dave says it's 10 times.
It could be.
We had reports today. People in China are telling us it could be several million people infected, 150,000, 200,000
That
dead.
would not be unusual for something like this.
Okay, real quickly in the wrap up, we got 30 seconds. What should be the best outcome that comes out of the India trip to you?
See, President Trump and Prime Minister Modi are the only two people in the world, if they were on the ballot in China against Xi Jinping, they would win an election there.
They win in a landslide.
Yeah,
those two guys win in a landslide.
Absolutely.
The Chinese people sit there and say those two guys would represent my interests, not the CCP's interests.
Yeah, and
not even a question.
And the upcoming Trump-Modi rally in Ahmedabad is going to make every U2 concert seem like a high school musical.
It'll be twice as big as Howdy Modi.
How big? Howdy Modi is the single best event he's had in his entire presidency. 50,000 people down there. What's to expect? We got about 10 seconds, 15 seconds.
Expect that that the Indian Americans are going to see something that they haven't expected before. That a president of the United States is speaking to their relatives in India, which is actually going to translate back here. And the Democrats should be on notice that they also need to start talking on the same lines.
Dave Ramaswamy, Jay Kansara, thank you very much for joining us here on War and Pandemic. We'll be back tomorrow. Dr. Stephen Hatfield, thank you. Episode 19. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 11.